Welcome to the Bulldog broadcast. I'm your host for the Field of 68 Media Network with our Gonzaga-centric conversations. I'm Dan Dickow, former player. Today's guest, one of the insiders, knows all the ins and outs of this year and years past because he's been the voice of the Bulldogs on the radio for quite some time. You may know him as Huddy. His real name, Tom Hudson. Tom, thanks for joining.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me on. It's great. And I always joke when I used to do this when I first started, you'd laugh because, you'd get somebody on, you'd be like, oh yeah, the longtime voice of, XYZ. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you're that longtime voice guy. And it's crazy how quickly it all moves along. But it's been a blast. It's been a heck of a run.
So how many years is it for you on the radio side? I know, I graduated in 2002. I believe Dennis Patchen was the radio guy. Then Greg Heister had a short stint before he moved over to TV. So how long has it been for you?
This is my 20th. Yeah, it's my 20th year on the radio. It's been pretty crazy, Dan. I moved to Spokane in 1996. I was working in TV at the time. And so I've been fortunate to see this entire run. It was actually funny. I always joke, the first Gonzaga TV story I ever did was on Matt Santangelo. And so I always joke about that. It was his redshirt freshman year. He was moving. He was going to be the starting point guard. And I remember talking to Fitz about it. And it's one of those things that just sticks out in your mind. He was like, hey, I'll tell you. And, Fitz, he was so self-depreciating. I tell you how big an idiot I was. He was like, I had John Stockton. I didn't start him, because at the time, no freshman had really started for GU, especially the point guard position. I mean, it just didn't happen in a mid-major league. And so it was kind of funny. So I go back to 96, covering the team, which has been awesome. But 20 years on the radio, it was what I always wanted to do. It was funny. I had a conversation with my dad at one point, and, he said, what? It's like TV thing's working pretty well for you. But he's like, but I think that might be, what you want to look at. And obviously I could have never expected that it was going to get to this, right? I mean, when I took the job, I was like, this is great. And, you guys had just finished and, it's like, okay, wait. So Elite Eight, Sweet 16, and back in the NCAA tournament, you had no idea this was going to happen. And for me, it was just a great opportunity to call, Division I games. I mean, what an unbelievable experience and how hard it is to get into this thing and to really get it rolling. And then, like you said, to be able to say, 20 years, it's been remarkable.
So 20 years as the, quote, voice of the Zags. You also call other sports, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct? Do you do the baseball, and then what other sports do you call as that voice?
Yeah, so baseball. So I call baseball as well, and and that's been fun, and that's a tremendous thing. Hey, and I do a lot of stuff, do a lot of banquet stuff, and you're around as much as you can be around, the other sports and the other coaches, and I've been fortunate to get to know, a lot of the people around GU, obviously being around, and so. That's been fun. I mean, honestly, a lot of the coaches at GU are some of my very best friends. And so that's been really cool. But yeah, baseball has been great. And I was just having this conversation with Gary Bell Jr. We had him on our Mark III radio show on Monday. And I said, you know what, Gary, I said, it's funny. It's like I grew up in Texas and I have no business living in Spokane for 25 years. My intention was always to go back home and be close to my family, I said, but you know what? I said, winning's fun, and it's like, and covering a winning program is great. And you look at, obviously, basketball has been so phenomenal. And our baseball program has been great too. Coach Mactoff and Coach Evans and now Brandon Harmon and Steve Bennett when he's here. I mean, we've had some really good success on the baseball side as well. And like I said, from playing, winning and losing, I mean, it's and being a part of winning teams and winning stuff, it excites you, it invigorates you, it keeps you around a little bit. And so, like I said, here I am 25 years later, and I think I can be here for a while. I really like it here in Spokane.
Awesome. Yeah, I would agree with that. Winning breeds winning, and winning cultures in one sport a lot of times kind of bleeds over to other sports within the athletic department. Now, in that 20 years of calling games, you've had a chance to work with a number of really good guys that are friends of mine, guys that were a big part of the program. Matt Santangelo, Richard Fox, Corey Violette, and now Adam Morrison. Can you give us a quick scouting report, if you might, on each of those guys in the broadcast booth? Because I'm sure they bring their own strengths.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan, and to me, it's one of the things when I talk about Gonzaga, and when you're explaining to people kind of what's it about Gonzaga and what makes it special and everything. And I think for me, I mean, the names that you just listed, everybody's a former player, right? And it's special that so many former players still live in our community and come back to our community. And then you look at everybody, you know, I mean, well-spoken. And like you said, they have, you know, good thoughts, and there's a work ethic there. And so, you know, it's funny, my first few years I was by myself. And then we had Richard come on, you know, when we had home games. Like, you know, I actually had him on once at halftime. And then it was like, hey, you know what? I'm sitting here by myself. Why don't you, you know, just stick around and you can do a little bit. And then we ended up working that into him doing home games with me. And then that following year, he started to travel with me. And, you know, that was great. It was fun working with Richard and getting to know him. Obviously, like you, he was a broadcasting major. And I know you guys went through with Dan Garrity. And, you know, it was fun, you know, having somebody, because it was really my first time to work with somebody. And Richard was a great guy to have doing that. And then the one thing about the job, you know, for me, it's how I make my living. You know, for guys that are my sidekicks, you know, that's not necessarily the case. And they have other jobs and they have their stuff going on in life and kids. And so, you know, when Richard wasn't able to do it, you know, then all of a sudden we have, you know, Matt come on, and then same deal, you know, so Matt, it's great. Everything's going fantastically. Life, you know, I don't want to say gets in the way. That's not fair, but, you know, life happens. And so he couldn't. Then we had Corey on for the one season and then on to Mo. And so it's been really interesting to see, I think, the different outlooks, you know, the different way that guys kind of see the game, right? With Richard, you know, he had a very, you know, I don't want to say unique perspective, but as a 7-footer, you know, as a guy who had transferred in and who had been around and who had seen another program, you know, he brought something to it. And then you bring in, you know, a point guard who was there and helped you know, get this thing started. And he's got a different way of looking at the game. I'm sure you deal with that, you know, with you and Richard when you guys are talking on TV, you know, and then bringing Corey in. I mean, Corey had his own very unique way of looking at it. Again, is a big guy, and you know, and then Mo, it's fascinating, you know, having a guy with a true scores mentality, and then a guy who, you know, was a part of that deal. I mean, that was, in my entire 20 years, the craziest year by far. You know, back before the internet and social media and all this stuff. I mean, we always talk about, hey, it was like the Beatles, you know, traveling around and how crazy that was and all the excitement and all of it. And he lived through all of that, right? And he was all of that. And, you know, and he has all these great NBA stories, you know, he'll start kind of bringing out and talking about those kind of things. So it's been really interesting to see, especially three completely unique. You know, you had the two big guys and then, you know, and then a point guard and now a guy who scored the heck out of it, you know, and he starts telling some of those stories. You know, hey, you know, he'd look over at the scorer's table towards the end of the game, and they were going to sub him out. And he'd miss the second free throw on purpose so he could get up a couple more shots. And, you know, you get some of that stuff from Mo that is pretty funny. And so it has been fun. And like I said, it's been great to have so many guys who are, you know, a big part of the program come back and be a part of it and be able to share the experiences and to see how much they care. I mean, obviously, you know, so many people heard the game against UCLA and heard Mo and his reaction to that and just the, you know, the raw excitement and energy about, hey, Gonzaga just, you know, won and is going. You know, I remember sitting with Matt in 2017 and literally tears, you know, come. I mean, I'm trying not to look at him because I don't want to cry, you know, and you know, just the emotion and how much everybody cares about it is something that's really special about what I get to do.
Before we move on to the next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with BetRivers yet, now's the time because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yeah, you kind of started alluding to the next question that I was going to answer. You've been in this for about 20 years. You've called great teams. You've been able to call 2 Final Four appearances and 2 title games that unfortunately have resulted in losses. Most broadcasters, that would be the pinnacle of their career, calling those type of games. What was the experience like for you?
Dan, it was incredible. And you know, the funny thing is, I want to go back. It was really funny. When we were in Houston in 2015, before the Elite Eight game against Duke, you know, we're sitting there at pregame meal and, you know, everybody's kind of leaving and we're sitting there, you know, the coaches usually hang out a little bit. And Donnie Daniels comes up to me and says, hey, he's like, what's your call? I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you have your Final Four call? And I was like, what are you talking about, Don? It hadn't really clicked. And that's not usually how I do things. That's just not my personality. I'm not going to have the witty, but hadn't really kind of put any of that together. Knowing we were 40 minutes away, it still wasn't hitting me like, oh my gosh, this is going to be this enormous deal. I mean, obviously you knew the gravity of the situation, but in my mind, I wasn't like, okay, I need to have this, this thing. So, I kind of laughed with Donnie after that, and we've joked about it over the years. And he'll still say it when he comes back down, even before 2017. It's like, hey, what's the call? Or Mark Livingston, our boss, he would say, hey, you tell Huddy, make sure he has a call. And so, in 2017, it was just unbelievable. I mean, that whole buildup to it, right? And the fact that, you had the thrilling game against West Virginia, and then the Xavier game was a blowout. So you were able to kind of appreciate a little bit and see it. And then getting to Phoenix, I mean, what a crazy thing, Dan, because, and I've gotten to know Matt Park from Syracuse a little bit over the years, just seeing him at different tournaments and stuff. And he sent me an email. It was very nice. It's like, hey, enjoy it. This is going to be incredible. You have no idea, just the enormity of the whole thing. And people are going to want, to talk to you and all this stuff. And it's going to be great. And it really was. It lived up to every single thing that you could possibly imagine. And you well know, being there, that night that all the former players went in, and the fact that there were so many guys there, that night before, I know we had done an hour-long show down at Marley's, I believe. And then, when everybody stuck around, there was a big party, and, and the celebration and the pure joy of, for, 18 years, we had all said, gosh, is this a team that's going to do it? This team can make it. This program can make it. And then for it to actually happen, and to see everybody that was such a large part of it, or so many of the people were such a large part of it, be there and be able to experience it was fantastic. I remember actually, we were sitting there before the Final Four game, and Mo comes walking down, in the stands. He comes walking down to join all the players, and he's wearing a tank top, and he's just red as a lobster, and people are cheering and going nuts, and he's holding his arms up in the air, and everybody was just so excited. It was so cool, and then the games themselves, I mean, just that feeling of, hey, we're here and this is happening and everybody's watching and everybody's paying attention and this is a huge deal. It was so much fun. And winning that game against South Carolina and just having that feeling of, okay, over all the years, and I was doing a lot of radio interviews at the time, and I would say, hopefully this lets people stop saying, what haven't they done, and opens up the door to look at what they have done. So now we can add a Final Four to all these Sweet 16s and these Elite Eights and, a championship game and all these things. And that part was very powerful, I think, because now when, because you've heard it, a million times, Gonzaga doesn't ever beat anybody, or they've never advanced to this, they've never done that. And that kind of, took a little bit of that weight off. And it was fun to be able to point out to people now, hey, look at all the things that this program has done. It's actually pretty remarkable if you look at this stretch. And, the championship game was weird, Dan, because I remember when we walked out after the game and you're sitting there and you're thinking, my gosh, we were so close. And there was such a great opportunity to win this thing. And as we packed up after the post-game show and we're walking out of the arena, I remember Matt and I and a couple of our administrators were all walking out together. It's like, how are we supposed to feel? On one hand, it's like, my gosh, the most historic season in school history. And this is awesome. We made it to the championship game and we were, 30 seconds and maybe a bad call or two away from winning a national championship. So we should be thrilled. And then the flip side is, but wait, we were 30 seconds and one or two whistles away from being the national champions, Yeah. And so I remember that being a very strange feeling walking out of obviously the pride and being a small part of seeing what the program had accomplished, but also kind of wondering, like, well, how are we supposed to feel? Are we elated? And obviously you're elated. I mean, you'd be an idiot to say that you weren't happy with, making the championship game and being that close. But, as the competitor, there's always that thing that's kind of, it's like, man, we were so close. Like, we're disappointed. No, we can't be disappointed. Like, we just played for a national title. So it was a great feeling. That whole weekend, it was just phenomenal. That whole week, I guess I should say.
Yeah, obviously I was down there, enjoying and celebrating Gonzaga's success. I had a few broadcasting obligations that week as well. But I love hearing people who are close to the program like yourself share their perspective, because I think it brings in players, brings in close media such as yourself, brings in the fans, all of that. And so it's great to hear those perspectives. Last thing I want to touch on, Tom, before we head out our separate ways today is this team is unique this year's version, 21-22 season. Preseason number one, a lot of it was based on having preseason player of the year Drew Timme coming back, as well as just a loaded freshman class. I think the room to grow has been bigger than any other team that I can remember in recent memory for Gonzaga, and we're just now starting to see that potential really starting to blossom. What do you see?
Dan, I agree with you. I think it's funny because, and obviously it's easy for me to say, well, gosh, I think Baylor should have been the number one team. But I mean, if you look at what they had, plus their recruiting class, and that they had won the national title, those preseason rankings, I think, get right maybe a little bit ahead of themselves. And I agree with you. I mean, obviously having Drew and Andrew back, you're like, okay, this is great. We've got a really good core to build around, and Anton, this guy who's been in the program, but bringing in so many new faces, yeah. And I think we've all kind of talked about there were going to be growing pains for this group. Last year we knew, right? I mean, going into the season, yeah, hey, we've got a chance to make it, not run the table. We've got a chance to play for another national championship. Coming in this year, I think everybody just kind of assumes, okay, well, it's got this recruiting class, and they've got some guys back, so they're gonna, they're gonna do this. Well, yeah, I mean, freshmen have to learn, right? And teams have to come together. And last year was such a veteran group and a historic group, right? That did so many great things. And this group comes in, and there's a lot to live up to, and it's going to take time. Right. I mean, even for Chet, for being the number one ranked recruit in the country, I mean, you saw him play his first couple of games, and you've seen him, play those games against top 25 teams. And now we see him playing 2 months later. Chet has improved. He's gotten better to learn how to play at this level, I think, and same thing with Hunter and Nolan. I mean, with each passing game, you see Hunter flying around doing some things. You see Nolan playing with a little bit more confidence. And, I'm with you. I think by the end of this year, this team is going to be so markedly different in the middle of March than it was, back in October when they got together. So, I just laugh hysterically. I don't know about you, but, when people say, what's going on with the boys, or how are we, it's like, well, let's see, we lost to Duke, in a game we had a chance to win. Yeah, okay, and we lost to, an Alabama team that's, was picked to win the SEC. And outside of that, like, are we forgetting the team that thumped Texas? Or are we forgetting the team that, that beat Texas Tech, that just beat Baylor, that has 2 top 10 wins over the last week? So, I mean, the expectations are so sky high. In a lot of ways, that's a good thing, I think. But, the flip side is every once in a while we have to kind of say, okay, wait a second. And I think with this group, that's been it. And I think we're starting to see it, come along, like you said. I think these guys have a great chance to be so much better as the season keeps moving on. And it's going to be interesting to see this week. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's always interesting to see how guys approach the WCC. And moving out of when you play all these, top 25 games early, and then you move into league play, and what your attitude is. Well, BYU, and we've seen them, there's been some words out of Provo a little bit. And there was a big, long article in The Athletic today that, had a few things that were kind of talking about it. And so it'll be interesting to see how fired up the guys are on Thursday, and hopefully they continue to improve, because I think this as well as anybody. Coach Few has done just a masterful job of keeping guys focused and dialed in and not losing games that they shouldn't lose. And so, hopefully they continue to do that and continue to grow towards, towards March, and hopefully, towards April.
Yeah. The way it's looking is it's a deep potential run in the NCAA tournament for Gonzaga. Well, Tom, I appreciate the time. I do enjoy listening to you and Mo when I don't call the games myself and I don't have access because of whatever's going on in my busy life to watch the game. So I appreciate you and Mo's coverage and calling of the games. And travel safe the rest of the year, and go Zags.
All right. Hey, Dan, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Great talking to you.